Welcome to Midnight Truth, where peaceful stories guide you into the perfect night's rest. Before we start, take a moment to like this video and subscribe. It helps me bring more soothing stories to you and others who need them. Let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is for you. Now, find your cozy spot, close your eyes, and let's begin this calming journey together. I pulled up to the house on a gray Tuesday afternoon, the kind of day where the sky can't decide if it wants to rain or just sulk. My hatchback was stuffed with boxes, clothes, books, a coffee maker I hadn't unpacked since the divorce. The house loomed at the end of Maple Street, older than the rest, with peeling paint and a sagging porch. It wasn't much, but it was mine, or at least rented, and that felt like a fresh start after everything with Jen fell apart. The realtor had called it a fixer-upper with character. I saw the character right away. Crooked shutters, a front door that groaned when I pushed it open, and a faint musty smell like wet wood and forgotten time. The floorboards creaked under my sneakers as I hauled in the first box. It was louder than I expected, almost like the house was complaining about me being there. I shook it off. Old houses make noise. That's what they do. I spent the day unpacking, trying to make the place feel like home. The living room had a fireplace with a chipped mantel, and the kitchen had a sink that dripped no matter how hard I twisted the faucet. Upstairs, the bedroom had a slanted ceiling and a window that rattled when the wind picked up. It wasn't cozy, not yet, but it was mine. I'd been bouncing between friends' couches and a cheap motel since the split, so having a roof, one I didn't have to share, felt like a win. That first night, I crashed on a mattress on the floor, too tired to set up the bed frame. The house was quiet, mostly. A few creaks here and there, the drip of the sink downstairs. Around midnight, I woke up to a thud, heavy and deliberate, like something falling off a shelf. I sat up, heart thumping, listening. Nothing, just the wind, I told myself. Old houses settle. I lay back down, staring at the ceiling, and eventually drifted off. The next morning, I met Mrs. Hargrove. She lived next door, a tiny woman with wiry gray hair and a habit of peering over her fence. I was dragging trash bags to the curb when she waved me over. "New tenant, huh?" she said, her voice scratchy like she'd smoked too many cigarettes. "Hope you're handy. That place needs work." "Yeah, I noticed," I said, smiling. "Nothing I can't handle, though." She squinted at the house, then back at me. "You know about it, don't you? The history?" I shrugged. Realtor didn't say much. Just that it's been empty a while. Empty, sure. She snorted. Last folks didn't last long. Ran out in the middle of the night, screaming about footsteps. Said the place was cursed. Of course, people say a lot of things. I laughed, figuring she was just a nosy neighbor with a flair for drama. Footsteps? Probably just the floorboards. They're loud enough. "Maybe," she said, but her eyes stayed sharp. "Just don't stay up too late listening, all right?" I waved her off and went back inside. Her story stuck with me, though nagging at the edges of my mind as I unpacked. Footsteps, curses, ridiculous. But that night, as I lay in bed, the house creaking around me, I couldn't help but listen a little harder. The wind picked up outside, rattling the window again, and for a moment, I thought I heard something else. A faint shuffle, like boots dragging across the floor upstairs. I held my breath, waiting. Nothing came. Just my imagination, I told myself, and rolled over, pulling the blanket tight. The rest of the week blurred by in a haze of unpacking and adjusting. The job at the hardware store started Monday, and I wanted to be ready. I set up a small desk in the corner of the living room, plugged in my laptop, and stacked my books beside it. Mostly thrillers and a few self-help titles Jen had left behind. The house stayed quiet during the day, sunlight filtering through the dusty windows, making it feel almost normal. But at night it shifted. The creaks grew sharper, the air heavier. I catch myself pausing mid-step, listening to the drip of the sink or the groan of the stairs, wondering if it was more than just the house being old. By Friday, I got in the bed frame up, though the mattress still sagged in the middle. I was beat from lugging boxes, so I ordered a pizza and ate it on the couch, the TV flickering with some late-night rerun. The delivery guy had given the house a funny look when he handed me the box, like he knew something I didn't. I brushed it off. Small towns and their quirks. Around 11 p.m., I turned off the TV and headed upstairs. The hallway was dark, the single bulb overhead too weak to reach the corners. I flipped on the bedroom light, and that's when I noticed it, a cold spot right by the door. My breath puffed out in a little cloud, and a shiver ran down my spine. I stepped back, then forward again. The cold was gone. Weird, I thought, but it's an old house. Drafts happen. I climbed into bed, the springs creaking under me, and tried to sleep. The wind was howling now, shaking the window pane, and the floorboards groaned in response. Then came the thud again, heavier this time, like a book hitting the floor. I sat up, straining to hear. It didn't repeat. I grabbed my phone, turned on the flashlight, and swept the beam around the room. Nothing out of place. Just a slanted ceiling, the rattling window, and me, feeling like an idiot. I lay back down, but my eyes stayed open, fixed on ceiling. Mrs. Hargrove's words echoed in my head. Footsteps, curses, people running out. I didn't believe in that stuff. I didn't, but as the house settled around me, creaking and sighing, I couldn't shake the feeling that it was watching me back. The next morning, I woke up groggy. The night's unease clinging to me like damp clothes. I made coffee, the drip of the machine matching the sink's rhythm, and sat at the kitchen table, staring out at the overgrown backyard. A squirrel darted across the grass, and I almost laughed at myself for getting spooked. It was just a house, wood and nails and bad plumbing. Nothing more. Still, when I saw Mrs. Hargrove watering her flowers later that day, I couldn't resist asking. I leaned over the fence, keeping it casual. Hey, you weren't kidding about the noise. This place creaks like crazy. She turned off the hose, wiped her hands on her apron. Told you. Old bones, that house. Got a lot to say. Yeah, but footsteps, I said, half smiling. That's a stretch, right? She didn't smile back. You hear him yet? I hesitated. Just thuds. Stuff settling, probably. Probably, she said, but her tone was flat, like she didn't buy it. Keep an ear out. You'll see. I nodded, waved, and went back inside. The day passed uneventfully. More unpacking. A trip to the store for groceries. A quick call to my mom to say I was settling in. But as night fell, the house woke up again. The creaks, the thuds, the faint shuffle I couldn't quite place. I told myself it was nothing, over and over, until I almost believed it. Almost. A week passed, and I started settling in. The new job at the hardware store wasn't glamorous. Stocking shelves, helping old guys find the right screws, but paid the bills. I'd moved to this nowhere town for a clean slate, and the house, quirks and all, was part of that. I got used to the creaks, the way the stairs groaned under my weight, the faint smell of mildew that never quite went away. It was home, or at least it was starting to feel that way. Mornings were simple. I'd stumble downstairs, brew coffee in the leaky kitchen, and sit by the window, watching the street wake up. Mrs. Hargrove would shuffle out to water her roses, always giving me a nod. Afternoons were work, and evenings were quiet, microwave dinners and scrolling my phone. The house stayed mostly still during the day, save for the occasional pop of a pipe or the hum of the fridge. Sunlight softened its edges, made it feel less like a relic and more like a place I could belong. Nights were different. The sound got louder after dark. Creaks turned into cracks, like something shifting its weight. Once, I heard a faint tapping, rhythmic, coming from the attic. Mice, I figured, or squirrels. I'd deal with it later. I wasn't about to climb up there in the middle of the night with a flashlight like some horror movie cliche. Still, it gnawed at me. That tapping, steady as a heartbeat, until it stopped just as I started to drift off. Mrs. Hargrove's words lingered, too. Footsteps, curses. I'd catch myself pausing, listening, then laughing it off. I wasn't the type to believe in ghost stories. Jen used to tease me about how practical I was. Fix the problem, don't overthink it. Maybe that's why she left. Too practical, not enough spark. Whatever. I had bigger things to worry about, like the cold spot in the hallway that made my breath fog, no matter how high I cranked the heat. I'd walk through it on my way to bed, shiver, and keep going. Old houses have drafts. That's all. Work gave me a rhythm, though I'd leave at 8, spend the day hauling boxes or ringing up nails, and come home around 5. The guys at the store were all right, gruff, but decent. One of them, Pete, asked about the house on my 3rd day. "You're in that old place on Maple, right? Heard it's a dump." "It's not so bad," I said, stacking paint cans. "Needs work, but I'm managing." He grunted. "Better you than me. My cousin lived there years back. Said it gave him the creeps." I raised an eyebrow. "Creeps how?" "Dunno. Noises, mostly. Moved out quick." He shrugged and walked off, leaving me with that little seed of doubt. I pushed it down. People exaggerate. Small towns thrive on it. That night, after a long shift, I was half asleep on the couch when I heard it. Thump, thump, thump. Heavy, like boots on wood, coming from upstairs. I bolted upright, heart racing. The sound stopped as soon as I moved. I sat there, ears straining, the TV humming in the background. Nothing, just the house, I told myself. With contracting, or whatever. But my pulse wouldn't slow. I grabbed a flashlight and crept up the stairs, the beam shaking in my hand. The bedroom was empty, mattress, desk, a few boxes still unpacked. The window rattled softly, but that was it. I checked the attic hatch and hallway. Closed tight, no sign of anything disturbed. I laughed, a shaky little sound, and went back downstairs. Probably the wind knocking something loose. I turned the TV up louder and stayed on the couch until I passed out, flashlight still in my lap. The next day, I dragged myself to work, bleary-eyed but functional. Pete noticed. "Rough night?" "Yeah," I said, rubbing my neck. "House makes weird noises. Kept me up." He smirked. "Told you. Creepy place." I didn't argue. When I got home, I decided to test it. I set my phone on the coffee table, hit record, and let it run while I cooked dinner. Spaghetti from a jar, nothing fancy. The house was quiet, just the sizzle of the stove and the drip of the sink. I played the recording back later, expecting nothing. There was faint but unmistakable thump, thump, thump. I froze, replaying it. It wasn't my footsteps. I'd been in the kitchen the whole time. I texted it to my buddy Mark from back home. "Try and keep it light. Check this out. New place is a vibe." He replied fast. "Dude, what the hell? That's not normal. You okay?" "It's fine." I texted back. Old house stuff. But I wasn't so sure anymore. I kept the recording, though. Proof I wasn't imagining it. Sunday, I saw Mrs. Hargrove again, raking leaves in her yard. I leaned over the fence, casual as I could manage. "You ever hear noises from the house when it was empty?" She stopped raking, leaned on the handle. "Oh, sure. Creaks, bangs. Folks used to say it was him. The first owner. Samuel Creed. Strange man. Lived here alone. Tinkered with things he shouldn't have." "Like what?" I asked, humoring her. "Books. Rituals. Occult nonsense," she said, waving a hand. "Died in that house, they say. Left a bad mark on it." I rolled my eyes. Sounds like a tall tale. "Maybe," she said, same as before. "Just keep an ear out." I didn't believe her. Not really. But that night, the thumping came back, louder, closer. I was in bed, lights off, when it started, slow and deliberate, like someone pacing the attic. I pulled the blanket up, stared at the ceiling, and waited. It didn't stop when I sat up this time. It kept going thump, 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 until I grabbed my phone and hit record again. The sound filled the room, steady, relentless. I played it back, hand shaking, and heard it clear as day. I didn't sleep much after that. The house felt different now. Less like a home, more like something watching me. I kept the lights on, told myself it was nothing, but deep down, I wasn't sure what I believed anymore. The routine held me together, coffee, work, dinner, but the nights were unraveling me, one thought at a time. Work kept me busy, but the nights were starting to wear me down. The thumping wasn't every night, But when it happened, it was impossible to ignore. It'd start soft, like something pacing upstairs, then build into these heavy, deliberate steps. I'd lie there, staring at the ceiling, telling myself it was a house settling, the pipes, the wind, anything but what Mrs. Hargrove hinted at. I'd gotten good at rationalizing. Too good, maybe, but the recordings on my phone weren't lies. I'd listen to them in the morning, over coffee, the sound tinny but real, and feel my stomach twist. One night, I decided to push back. I was tired of feeling like a guest in my own place. I set my phone on the nightstand, hit record, and waited. Around 1 a.m., it started thump, 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 slow at first, then faster, like whatever was knew I was listening. I didn't move, just lay there, eyes locked on the ceiling, letting it play out. The sound circled the room, or seemed to, bouncing from the attic to the walls. I played it back the next morning, hunched over the kitchen table, the drip of the sink keeping time. It was there, clear as day, but fainter than it felt in the moment, like the house was whispering its secrets through static. I texted it to Mark again. No jokes this time. Happening a lot. What do you think? He called me right away, voice tight. Man, that's not pipes. That's footsteps. You need to get out of there. It's just an old house, I said, but my voice sounded thin, even to me. I'll figure it out. You're nuts, he said. Call me if it gets worse. I didn't tell him it already had. The cold spots were harder to brush off now. They'd pop up randomly. Hallway, kitchen, once right by the fireplace. I'd walk through and feel this sharp chill, like stepping into a freezer. My breath would puff out, then it'd be gone, like it was playing with me. I checked the windows, the vents, even poked around the fireplace for drafts. Everything was sealed tight. Maybe bad insulation, I told myself, but it didn't explain why it moved, why it followed me from room to room. Then there was the smell. It wasn't the mildew anymore. It was sharper, like burnt herbs or old incense. It had hit me out of nowhere, usually at night, lingering for a minute before fading. The first time, I thought I left the stove on, tore the kitchen apart looking for the source. Nothing. The next night, it came back, stronger, curling up in the living room while I watched TV. I checked the fireplace. Cold, no ash. It was starting to feel personal, like the house was testing me, seeing how much I could take. Work was my lifeline. I dragged myself in, bleary from lack of sleep, and lose myself in a routine. Lifting boxes, sorting tools, chatting with Pete. He caught me zoning out one day, hands frozen on a shelf. You still hearing that crap at night? Yeah, I said, not looking up. It's fine, just loud. He snorted. You look like death. Fix it or move. I nodded, but fixing it wasn't that simple. That night, after a double shift, I crashed early, hoping exhaustion would drown out the noise. No luck. The thumping started at midnight, louder, angrier, like something stomping across the attic. I bolted upright, grabbed a flashlight, and stormed upstairs, ready to confront whatever it was. Mice, wind, my own damn imagination. The attic hatch was still shut, the bedroom empty. But the air was cold, so cold my teeth chattered, and that smell, burnt and bitter, filled my nose. I went back to bed, pulled the covers over my head like a kid, and waited it out. The thumping faded, but the smell stayed, seeping into my dreams. I woke up to the alarm, throat scratchy, eyes burning, and found my breath foggy in the bedroom. The heat was on, cranked to 70, but it didn't matter. Something was wrong with this place, and I couldn't keep pretending it wasn't. Over the fence that weekend, I asked Mrs. Hargrove about it, keeping my voice steady. You ever smell anything weird from the house? Like smoke or spices? She stopped raking, leaned on the handle, and gave me that sharp look of hers. Incense, you mean? Yeah, folks mentioned that. Said it was Creed's doing. Burn stuff for his rituals, they say. Trying to talk to the dead, or worse. I forced a grin, clinging to skepticism. Come on, you don't buy that, do you? Don't have to buy it, she said, brushing leaves off her gloves. Lived next to this place 50 years. Seen people come and go. They all smell it eventually. Hear it, too. I didn't push her. What was there to say? She wasn't wrong about the smells, the sounds, but rituals, talking to the dead, that was a leap I wasn't ready to make. I went back inside, brewed more coffee, and tried to shake it off. The day was quiet, sunny, almost normal. I mowed the tiny patch of lawn, swept the porch, anything to keep my hands busy and my mind off the night ahead. When the sun went down, though, the house came alive again. The thumping started early, before I even got to bed, and the incense smell hit me as I climbed the stairs. I stopped halfway, gripping the banister, and yelled, "Cut it out!" My voice echoed, stupid and small, and the noise stopped for a second. Then it came back, louder, like a challenge. I ran upstairs, flashlight swinging, but found nothing. Just the cold, the smell, and that damn thumping, now right above me in the attic. I didn't sleep that night. I sat on the couch, TV blaring, a baseball bat across my lap. Every creak made me flinch. Every shadow looked wrong. The house felt bigger, somehow, like it was stretching around me, and I was shrinking. I kept the lights on, told myself I'd figure out tomorrow. But tomorrow felt a long way off. The thumping faded around 3 a.m., leaving me with the drip of the sink and my own ragged breathing. By morning, I was a mess, jumpy, wired, caffeine keeping me upright. I couldn't keep living like this. The house wasn't just old. It was something else, something I didn't have a word for yet. And it was starting to feel like it didn't want me there, or maybe it wanted me too much. I couldn't keep pretending everything was fine. The noises, the smells, the cold. They were piling up, and my excuses were running thin. I wasn't sleeping much, and work noticed. My boss pulled me aside one day, arms crossed, frowning at the bags under my eyes. "You look like hell, kid. Everything okay?" "Yeah, just adjusting to the new place." I mumbled, avoiding his gaze. He didn't push, just told me to get together, and I nodded like I had a plan. I didn't. But I knew I had to figure out what was going on before I lost it completely. Saturday morning, I decided to take control. I grabbed a flashlight in a toolbox and went room by room, looking for anything. Loose boards, leaky pipes, something to pin this on. The living room was solid, fireplace included, though the chipped mantle stared back at me like it knew something I didn't. The kitchen had that dripping sink, but the pipes were dry, no leaks. Upstairs, the bedroom was bare except for my stuff, mattress, desk, a few boxes, and a layer of dust I hadn't bothered to clean. I tapped the walls, listening for hollow spots. Anything off? Nothing unusual, just the creak of wood under my knuckles. The attic was next. I'd been avoiding it, but I couldn't anymore. The hatch was in the hallway ceiling, a rusty pull-down ladder that screeched when I yanked it open. Dust rained down, catching in my throat as I climbed up, flashlight beam cutting through the dark. It was cramped, all beams and insulation, with a few old boxes shoved in the corner. I crawled over, careful not to put a foot through the ceiling, and opened the first one. Newspapers, yellowed and brittle, from the 70s, headlines about gas prices and local fairs. Another had moth-eaten clothes, jackets, a scarf, a pair of gloves with holes in the fingers. Nothing special. The last box was heavier, locked with rusty padlock. I shook it, heard something shift inside, books maybe, or papers. I'd need a crowbar to crack it open, and I wasn't that desperate yet. Not quite. Downstairs, I tackled the basement. The door was under the stairs, warped and stuck, paint flaking off in strips. I had to shove it with my shoulder to get in, the wood groaning like it didn't want me there. The air down there was damp, thick with that mildew smell I'd gotten used to. Bare bulbs flickered when I flipped the switch, casting long shadows across the concrete floor. It was mostly empty, rusty water heater, some cracked shelves leaning against the wall, a pile of cobwebs. But in the far corner, under a tarp stiff with age, I found a trunk, old, wooden, with carved initials on the lid. S.C. Samuel Creed, maybe? My stomach twisted. I lifted the lid, half expecting bones or something grim from one of Jen's old thrillers. Just papers, letters, sketches, a few photos of the house from decades ago. Its paint still fresh then. Nothing jumped out, but I hauled it upstairs to look closer. That night, the thumping started again, louder, angrier. I ignored it at first, spread the papers on the kitchen table, and dug in under the weak glow of the overhead light. The letters were faded, handwriting shaky, addressed to someone named Eliza. They rambled about openings and bindings, words that didn't make sense without context. The sketches were worse. Circles with symbols I didn't recognize, jagged lines like claw marks scratched into page. One photo showed a man in a long coat standing on the porch, staring straight at the camera, eyes dark and unblinking. I flipped it over. Samuel, 1942, was scrawled on the back in spidery ink. I grabbed my laptop, Googled him. Not much came up, just an obit from 53 saying he died in the house. No family, no cause listed. A local history forum had a thread about him, though people called him a recluse, said he'd been into dark arts, whatever that meant. One post claimed he'd built the house himself, designed it wrong on purpose. Angles off, rooms too small or too big. I closed the laptop, rubbed my eyes. This was getting ridiculous. But the thumping kept going, shaking the walls now, and I couldn't unsee those sketches. Couldn't unhear Mrs. Hargrove's voice saying rituals. I needed more. Sunday, I went back to the basement, flashlight in hand. The trunk's contents still scattered on the table. I scanned the concrete floor, the shelves, looking for anything I'd missed. The air felt heavier down there, pressing on my chest. I ran the flashlight along the walls. And that's when I saw it. A faint scratch, a circle etched into the floor near where I'd found the trunk. It was barely there, like someone had carved it with a nail, but it matched one of the sketches. My mouth went dry. I knelt, traced it with my finger. Nothing happened. No hum, no shiver, just cold concrete. I stood up, feeling stupid but unsettled. Back upstairs, I locked the trunk and shoved it under the table. The thumping had stopped, but the silence wasn't comforting. It was thick waiting. I tried to sleep, but around 3 a.m., I heard something new, a low, raspy whisper, too faint to make out. It came from nowhere, everywhere, slipping under the door and through the walls. I sat up, heart pounding, and flicked on the lamp. The room was empty, but the whisper lingered in my head, a single word I couldn't catch. I didn't sleep after that. Morning came slow, gray light creeping through the window, and I sat there, staring at the trunk's papers, the photo of Samuel Creed burning a hole in my mind. This wasn't just an old house anymore. It was his house, and whatever he'd left behind was waking up. I didn't know what to do with that yet, but I knew I couldn't ignore it much longer. The investigation wasn't over. It was just starting. I couldn't let it go. The papers from the basement nagged at me. Samuel Creed's face staring up from that old photo every time I closed my eyes. After another night of footsteps and that whisper, low, insistent, scraping at my nerves, I went back down there Sunday morning. The basement door stuck again, but I forced it open, the damp air hitting me like a wet rag. The trunk was still there, right where I'd left it, heavy and silent under the flickering bulbs. I dragged it upstairs, grunting with the effort, and set it by the fireplace. The house creaked around me, like it was watching, but I ignored it and started sorting through the mess inside. Most of it was junk, tax receipts from the 40s, faded bills for lumber and coal, a couple of grocery lists in that same shaky handwriting. But near the bottom, buried under a stack of yellowed envelopes, I found it, a leather-bound journal, pages warped and stained, tied shut with a frayed cord that crumbled when I tugged it loose. My hand shook as I opened it, the leather crackling under my fingers. The first entry was dated April 12, 1940, written in a tight, precise script. The house is complete. The angles are set. Eliza doubts me, but she'll see. The door will open soon. I flipped ahead, the words pulling me in. The entries got stranger, more obsessive. Samuel wrote about thresholds and bindings, about voices guiding him. Soft at first, then louder, demanding. One page had a sketch of the basement, a circle drawn exactly where I found that faint carving in the concrete. Under it, he'd written, "The anchor holds it shut. For now." My pulse quickened. I'd touched that spot, felt nothing, but here it was, staring back at me from the page. By 1942, his writing was jagged, frantic. They won't stop. The footsteps circle me. I hear them through the walls. I burn the sage, spoke the words, but it's not enough. The door is cracking. I turn the pages faster, the paper brittle under my thumbs. The entries grew shorter, more desperate. In 47, he wrote, "Eliza's gone. She wouldn't stay. It's just me and them now." Then in 50, the cold comes with them. I can't warm the house anymore. The last entry from 53 was a scrawl, ink smeared like he'd written it in a hurry. "It's here. I can't close it. Forgive me, Eliza." I sat back, journal in my lap, the house creaking louder now, like it was agreeing with him. This was nuts. Rituals? Doors to what? But the thumping I'd heard, the cold spots, that burnt smell, it fit too well. I grabbed my phone, searched Samuel Creed occult. My fingers clumsy on the screen. A few crackpot sites popped up, claiming he'd been a warlock, that he'd torn the veil in that house, whatever that meant. One forum post said he died screaming, clawing at the basement walls. No proof, just rumors. Still, my skin prickled, and I set the phone down, staring at the journal like it might bite me. That night, I didn't sleep. The footsteps were relentless, pacing the attic, then the stairs, heavy and purposeful. The incense smell choked the air, stronger than ever, curling up from the floorboards. I stayed in bed, clutching the journal, reading bits aloud to myself like it'd make sense if I said it out loud. It didn't. Around 3 a.m., I heard the whisper again. Clearer this time, a low, guttural rasp. "Open." I bolted upright, the flashlight tumbling off the nightstand, its beam spinning across the walls. The room was empty, but the air turned frigid, and something brushed my arm, icy, fleeting, like fingers trailing over my skin. I didn't think. I grabbed the broom from the corner and swung it at the ceiling, yelling, "Shut up!" The thumping stopped, abrupt and total, but the smell stayed, thick and suffocating. The cold spot bloomed right beside me, my breath fogging in the dim light. I stumbled out of bed, heart hammering, and checked the attic hatch. Still shut, no dust disturbed. The stairs creaked under me as I went downstairs, the journal tucked under my arm like a shield. In the kitchen, I made coffee, hands shaking so bad I spilled grounds on the counter. The house was quiet now, but it wasn't a relief. It was a pause, like it was waiting for me to crack. I sat at the table, flipping to the journal again, looking for something, anything to explain this. The door kept coming up, opening it, closing it, holding it shut. Was it the circle in the basement? The trunk? Me being here? I didn't know. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd stumbled into something Samuel Creed had started, something he couldn't finish. Morning came, gray and heavy, and I didn't feel any better. The journal sat there, a weight on the table, its pages full of a dead man's madness. I wanted to throw it out, burn it, but I couldn't. It was the only thing that made the noises real, that tied them to something I could touch. Work was in a few hours, but I didn't care. I called in sick, my voice hoarse over the phone, and my boss didn't argue, just told me to rest. Rest, like that was possible. I didn't believe in ghosts, not really. Jen used to drag me to haunted houses every Halloween, laughing when I rolled my eyes at the fake screams. But this wasn't fake. The footsteps, the whispers, they were here, and they weren't stopping. I looked at the journal, at Samuel's last words, "It's here," and wondered what he'd let in, and why it was still here with me. Monday morning, I called in sick again. My voice cracked over the phone, and my boss didn't push, just muttered something about getting better and hung up. I couldn't face work, not with my head spinning, and my hands still trembling from the night before. The journal sat on the kitchen table, its warped leather taunting me, Samuel Creed's words looping in my mind. "It's here. I can't close it." I hadn't slept, hadn't eaten, just sat there staring at it, the house creaking around me like it was laughing. The thumping, the whispers, the cold, they weren't random anymore. They were building, pressing in, and my excuses were gone. I tried to rationalize it. Old houses, bad pipes, my own tired brain. But that icy touch on my arm last night wasn't imagination. It was real, and it scared the hell out of me. I couldn't keep living like this, jumping at every sound, waiting for the next thing to happen. I had to do something. I started with the basement again, flashlight in hand. I forced the door open. It was scraping against the frame. The air was colder than before, damp and heavy, like it was holding its breath. I swept the beam across the concrete, found that faint circle etched into the floor. It looked sharper now, or maybe I was just seeing it different, jagged lines radiating out like cracks in glass. I knelt, ran my fingers over it, half expecting a jolt or a hum. Nothing, just rough concrete, cold against my skin. I stood up muttering, "This is stupid," but my voice sounded small, swallowed by the dark. Back upstairs, I grabbed the journal and reread it, pacing the living room. Samuel kept mentioning the anchor, something holding it shut. The circle? The trunk? I didn't know, but I couldn't sit still. The house felt alive, restless, the floorboards groaning under me like they were shifting on purpose. I tried a nap, collapsing on the couch, but the thumping started early, before sunset even hit. It wasn't pacing anymore, it was stomping, furious, shaking the ceiling. Dust sifted down, catching in the fading light, and I bolted upright, hard in my throat. I grabbed my phone, hit record, and held it up, the red dot blinking. The sound was deafening now. Thump, 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 like boots slamming down, and then the whisper cut through, "Open it." Clear as day, raspy and close, like it was right behind me. I spun around, flashlight swinging, but the room was empty. The recording caught it, though, static and stomps in that voice, low and guttural. I played it back, hands shaking, and felt my stomach drop. This wasn't mice. This wasn't wind. I couldn't take it anymore. I stormed outside, the cold air slapping my face, and banged on Mrs. Hargrove's door. She answered in a robe, gray hair wild, frowning like I'd woken her. "What's wrong with you?" "The house," I said, voice cracking. "The noises, the cold. You know something. Tell me." She sighed, stepped aside, and let me in. Her kitchen smelled like tea and old wood, a stark contrast to the incense stink I'd left behind. She poured me a cup, hands steady where mine weren't, and sat across from me. Talked. "It's every night now," I said, clutching the mug. Footsteps. Whispers. Something touched me last night. I found a journal. Samuel Creed's. He wrote about a door, rituals. What the hell is going on? She didn't flinch, just sipped her tea. Creed was a nutcase. Built that place to channel things, spirits, demons, who knows. People said he went mad, died raving about something he'd let in. Tenants after him never stayed. Footsteps, smells, cold spots. Same as you're getting. Why didn't you tell me? I snapped, slamming the mug down, tea sloshing over the edge. "Would you have believed me?" She shot back, eyes narrowing. "You laughed it off when I tried. Nobody listens till it's too late." She was right. I wouldn't have. I'd thought she was a nosy old bat spinning yarns. But now I believed her, and it didn't make me feel better. It made me feel trapped. What do? I asked quieter now. "Leave," she said, blunt as a hammer. "Or figure out what he did and undo it." But I wouldn't bet on that. I left her place, head buzzing, the journal tucked under my arm. The sun was gone, the street dark, and my house loomed at the end of it, windows black and still. I went back inside, stupid maybe, but I couldn't just run. Not yet. The thumping started as soon as I shut the door, louder, angrier, like it knew I'd talked about it. I ignored it, sat at the table, and opened the journal again, flashlight beam dancing over the pages. Samuel's words blurred together, doors, bindings, anchors, but nothing told me how to stop it. The night stretched on, and the house went wild. The stomping shook the walls, the incense smell burned my throat, and the whispers grew into a chorus. "Open it! Open it! Open it!" I barricaded myself in the bedroom, shoved a chair against the door, but the cold seeped through anyway, frosting the windows despite the heat blasting. I sat on the bed, bat in my hands, watching my breath puff out, listening to the footsteps circle the room. They didn't stop. They got closer. By morning, I was done. I couldn't fight it, couldn't sleep through it, couldn't think straight. The house had won whatever game it was playing, and I was breaking. I grabbed my keys, my phone, the journal, and stumbled outside, the dawn gray and quiet. Mrs. Hargrove was right. I had to leave. But as I stood there, staring at the house, I knew running wouldn't be enough. Whatever Samuel Creed had started, it wasn't finished with me yet. I spent Tuesday digging, desperate for anything to make sense of the mess I'd landed in. The journal was my only lead, but it was cryptic, full of Samuel Creed's ramblings about doors and bindings. I needed more facts, not rumors. I started at the library, a squat brick building downtown with flickering fluorescents and a musty smell that rivaled my basement. The librarian, a bored woman with thick glasses, pointed me to the local history section. I found old records, deeds, obits, a grainy photo of Creed standing in the basement, smirking like he'd won something. The obit was the same one I'd seen online. Died 53, no cause, no kin. Nothing new. But seeing it on paper made it heavier, realer. I called a local historian next. A guy Pete at work had mentioned once. He answered on the third ring, voice creaky like he was half asleep. Samuel Creed? Yeah, I've heard the stories. Recluse, oddball. Some say dabbled in occult stuff. Rituals, seances. Small town gossip, mostly. No evidence. I thanked him and hung up, frustrated but not surprised. Gossip wouldn't help me sleep at night. Online was my last shot. I sat at the kitchen table, laptop humming, and dove deeper, past the crackpot sites into obscure forums and blogs. One post stuck out. A guy claiming Creed had used the house as a beacon for something beyond, built it with wrong angles to pull at the fabric of reality. No proof, just theories. But it echoed the journal's talk of thresholds and openings. I cross-checked the symbols from the sketches, those jagged circles and claw-like lines. A sight on occult runes, so they might be binding sigils, meant to hold something in or out. My head spun. This was too much, too crazy, but I couldn't stop. The journal was a theory, though. It was real, sitting there in my hands, pages curling at the edges. I flipped back to the basement sketch, the circle labeled anchor. If that was supposed to hold something shut, why was it loose now? Had I messed it up, dragging the trunk out? I didn't know, but I needed to. The house wasn't letting me off easy. Last night proved that. The stomping, the whispers, that chorus of open it. It was personal now, aimed at me. I went back to the attic, flashlight tucked in my belt. The lockbox from before was still there, padlock rusted but stubborn. I grabbed a crowbar from the toolbox and pried it open, metal screeching as it gave way. Inside were books, old, leather-bound, spines cracked and flaking. The pages were in a language I couldn't read, Latin maybe, with symbols matching the journal sketches. I snapped photos with my phone and sent them to Mark, who'd taken Latin in college. Any idea what this is? I texted. He replied an hour later. Dude, looks like ritual stuff, binding or summoning. Hard to tell without more. Where'd you get this? Be careful. Careful. Too late for that. I stacked the books on the table, their weight adding to the journals, and kept digging. That night, the house went berserk. The thumping started at dusk, louder than ever, shaking the windows. The incense smell hit like a wave, burning my eyes, and the whispers turned sharp. Open it, open it, open it. Over and over, a chant that drilled into my skull. I locked myself in the bedroom, chair jammed on a knob, but the cold slipped through, icing the walls. My breath fogged, my hands shook, and the footsteps didn't stop. They circled faster, closer, like something prowling just outside the door. I grabbed one of the attic books, flipped through it, looking for anything familiar. A page had a circle like the basement's, surrounded by runes, with a note scratched in English. To seal, speak the words at the anchor. No words listed, no help. I slammed it shut, cursing Creed, cursing myself for moving here. The thumping pounded overhead, dust raining from the ceiling, and I yelled, "Leave me alone!" It didn't. It got louder. I couldn't stay like this. Wednesday morning, I skipped work again, third day in a row, probably risking my job, and drove to Mrs. Hargrove's. She was in her yard, clipping roses, and barely looked up when I stumbled over. "You're back," she said, flat. "I need to know more," I said, voice raw. The journal, the books. He was trying to open something. What was it? She snipped the stem, tossed in the pile. Don't know exactly. Spirits, maybe. Something worse. He built that house to call it, and it stayed. That's all I got. How do I stop it? I pressed. You don't, she said, finally meeting my eyes. You leave, or it takes you. Creed didn't stop it. Why would you? I walked away, her words sinking in. The journal, the books, the circle, they were pieces. But I didn't have a whole picture. Back home, I sat with them. The house quiet for once, sunlight slanting to the windows. It felt like a trick, a breather before the next round. I had to end this, find the words or the anchor or whatever Creed had screwed up. But as night fell, the thumping started again, and I knew I was running out of time. Whatever he'd called, it was here, and it wasn't waiting much longer. Wednesday, I prepped. I couldn't keep running in circles, chasing half answers while the house tore me apart. The journal and those attic books were all I had. So I leaned into them, grasping at anything that might work. I hit the hardware store before it got dark. Didn't tell Pete why I'd been out. Just grabbed a bag of salt and some candles. Stuff I'd seen in movies and hoped wasn't total nonsense. Back home, I hauled it all to the basement, the door creaking open like it was daring me. The circle was still there, etched into the concrete, faint but sharp under the flashlight's beam. I poured the salt around it, a shaky ring that spilled over my hands, and set the candles at the edges. 4 of them, cheap and waxy, flickering as I lit them. The air was thick, damp, pressing on my lungs. I opened the journal to a page Samuel had labeled binding, a jumble of words I couldn't pronounce, Latin maybe or something older. I read them aloud, stumbling over the syllables, my voice echoing off the walls. Claudera umbra tenebris. It felt ridiculous, like a kid playing pretend, but I kept going, hoping it'd do something. The house didn't care. The thumping started upstairs, slow at first, then building, shaking the beams. The candles flickered, wax dripping onto the concrete, and that incense smell rolled in, choking me. I finished the passage, voice hoarse, and waited. Nothing changed. The stomping got worse, angrier, and the whispers hissed through the dark. Open it! Open it! Like I'd pissed them off. I kicked the salt, scattered it, and ran upstairs, slamming the basement door shut. Useless. Whatever Creed had done, my half-assed ritual wasn't touching it. I tried to sleep, but midnight hit, and everything went to hell. I was in bed, lights off, when the air turned frigid, sharp, biting cold that sank into my bones. My breath fogged, curling in the dark, and then the mattress sank, slow and heavy, like someone sat on it. I froze, eyes wide, every muscle locked. The weight pressed down, right by my legs, deliberate and real. I couldn't breathe, couldn't move, just lay there as footsteps started, slow, deliberate, circling the room. Thump, 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 with groaning under invisible boots. Then the voice right by my ear, raspy and close. You opened it. My scream ripped out, raw and loud, and I bolted up, swinging the flashlight off the nightstand. The beam cut through the dark, but there was nothing, no figure, no shadow, just the empty room and that weight still pressing on the bed. The footsteps kept going, circling tighter, and the cold gripped me, frosting the windows, my breath coming in short, panic puffs. I didn't think. I grabbed the bat from the corner and swung at the air, yelling, "Get out!" The footsteps paused, just for a second, then started again, louder, mocking me. I ran, tripping over the rug, and stumbled down the stairs, the bat clattering behind me. The living room was dark, the fireplace cold, but the basement door was open, wide open, swinging on its hinges. I hadn't touched it. I'd locked it after the salt fiasco. The air pulsed, thick and wrong, and the thumping followed me down, echoing from everywhere, attic, stairs, walls. I grabbed my phone, the journal, my keys, and bolted outside, barefoot on the cold grass. The house loomed behind me, windows black, creaking like it was alive. Angry I'd run. I stood there, panting, watching it, half expecting something to step out. Nothing did, but the thumping carried through the night, faint but steady, a heartbeat I couldn't escape. I drove to a motel, hands shaking on the wheel, the journal tossed on the passenger seat. The clerk gave me a weird look, wild hair, no shoes, bat in hand, but handed me a key without a word. I locked myself in room 12, shoved the dresser against the door, and sat on the sagging bed, staring at the journal, the weight on the mattress. That voice, it wasn't a dream. It was real, and it knew me now. You opened it. It had said, "Open what? The trunk? The circle?" I hadn't done anything except live there, but maybe that was enough. I flipped through the journal, flashlight beam trembling, looking for answers. Samuel's last entry burned into me. It's here. I can't close it. Was this what he'd felt? This thing, this presence, sitting on his bed, whispering in his ear. The books from the attic mentioned ceiling. But I didn't have the words, didn't know the rules. I'd tried, and it had laughed at me. Those footsteps, that voice, proving I was nothing to it. Sleep didn't come. I sat there, bat across my lap, listened to motels hum. Cars outside, a TV next door. No thumping, no whispers, but the cold lingered in my bones, a reminder. The house had pushed me out, but I wasn't free. Whatever Creed had let in, it wasn't staying put. It had touched me, spoken to me, and I didn't know how to make it stop. All I knew was I couldn't go back. Not yet, maybe not ever. But as dawn crept through the curtains, I heard it, faint and far off. Thump, thump, thump. It wasn't done with me. I didn't leave the motel room all day Thursday. The journal stayed on the bed beside me, unopened, its leather cover staring up like an accusation. I grabbed a coffee from the vending machine down the hall, burnt and bitter, and nursed it while the TV droned. Some game show, all bright lights and fake laughs. It kept the silence away, but not the cold. It clung to me, a dull ache in my chest, even with the heater rattling full blast. The thumping from last night echoed in my head, that weight on the mattress, that voice. You opened it. I couldn't shake it, couldn't unfeel it. I called Mark around noon, voice low, so the walls wouldn't hear. "I'm out," I said. "Motel for now." It got bad. "Bad how?" he asked, sharp and quick. Something sat on my bed, spoke to me. I ran. Saying out loud made it worse, realer, somehow. He didn't laugh, didn't doubt me. "Stay out. Crash with me if you need to. That place sounds cursed." "Yeah," I said, staring at the journal. "Maybe it is." I didn't tell him about the thumping I'd heard at dawn. Faint but there, like it had followed me. I wanted to believe it was in my head. Exhaustion playing tricks, but deep down, I knew better. The house wasn't letting go that easy. I spent the day pacing the room, replaying everything. Samuel's words, the circle, the books. I disturbed something, or it had been waiting all along, and now it had my scent. By afternoon, I knew I had to get my stuff. Not everything, just clothes, my laptop, enough to keep going. I couldn't leave it all behind. Couldn't let the house win completely. I drove back at dusk, the sky bruising purple, my hands tight on the wheel. Maple Street was quiet, Mrs. Hargrove's lights off, the house waiting at the end like it had been expecting me. I parked, grabbed the bat, and stepped out, the air cold and still. The porch creaked under my boots, louder than it should have, and the front door swung open with a groan before I even touched it. Inside, the air was thick, that incense smell curling up on the floorboards. No thumping yet, just silence, heavy and wrong. I moved fast, bedroom first, stuffing a duffel with shirts, jeans, socks. The mattress sat there, sheets tangled from last night, and I swore I saw an indent, faint but real, where it had sat. I didn't linger. Downstairs, I grabbed my laptop, a few books, the coffee maker, stupid maybe, but it was mine. The trunk and journal stayed. I wasn't touching them again. The house watched me, creaking with every step, shadows stretching longer than they should. I was at the door, bag slung over my shoulder, when the thumping started, slow, deliberate, coming from the attic. Thump, thump, thump. I froze, bat in hand, heart slamming against my ribs. The air turned cold, my breath fogging, and the whisper slid through. "Open it." Low, raspy, right behind me. I spun, swinging the bat at nothing. The air empty but alive. pulsing. I ran, dropped the bat, bolted to the car, threw the bag in the back, and peeled out, tires screeching. The house shrank in the rear view, windows dark, but I heard it. Thump, 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 faint through the glass, chasing me down the street. I didn't stop until I hit the motel, locking the door behind me, chest heaving. Safe, I told myself. Ow! I called Mrs. Hargrove that night, hands still shaky. I'm gone, I said when she picked up. Couldn't stay. That place is not right. Told you. She said, no smugness, just a tired kind of pity. Smart to leave. Most don't. What happens now? I asked, voice small. Someone else moves in. She said, always do. Hope they're tougher than you. I hung up, her words sinking in. The house didn't need me. It'd wait for the next sucker. I crashed on a motel bed, lights on, TV muttering, and slept for the first time in days, fitful but deep. No thumping, no whispers, just the hum of the heater and my own ragged breathing. Friday, I found a co-worker, Jake, who'd let me crash on his couch. I didn't tell him everything, just that the house was a wreck and I bailed. He shrugged, handed me a beer, and said, "Mi casa, man." His place was small, cluttered, but quiet. No creaks, no cold spots. I unpacked my duffel, set the laptop up, and tried to breathe. Normal. I could do normal again. But that night, lie on the couch, I woke up freezing, breath fogging the dark. No sound, no footsteps, just a cold, sharp, and familiar wrapping around me. I sat up, heart racing, and listened. Nothing. Jake's snores rumbled from the next room. The clock ticked. 2:47 a.m. I told myself it was nothing, just my body remembering, and lay back down, pulling the blanket tight. Morning came, and I almost believed it. Almost. But as I sipped coffee, staring at Jake's peeling wallpaper, I heard it, faint, so faint I could have dreamed it. Thump. Just once, then gone. I spilled the coffee, hand shaking, and told myself it was the pipes, the neighbors, anything but what I knew it was. I'd escaped the house, but something had followed me out, and it wasn't done yet. I crashed with Jake for a week, trying to piece myself back together. His couch was lumpy. The apartment smelled like stale beer and takeout, but it was safe, or felt that way. At first, I went back to work, told Pete and the boss I'd had a rough stretch, and they didn't pry. Stocking shelves, ringing up bolts. It was mindless enough to keep my hands busy and my head quiet. Days were okay. Sunlight, noise, people. Nights were harder. I'd told Jake the full story one evening over pizza, words spilling out between bites. The thumping, the cold, the voice, the thing on my bed. He listened, eyebrows climbing, then leaned back and whistled. That's messed up, man. You sure it wasn't just like bad wiring or something? It sat on my bed. I said, voice flat, spoke to me. Wiring doesn't do that. He didn't argue, just cracked another beer and changed the subject. I didn't blame him. It sounded crazy even to me, and I'd lived it. But he didn't kick me out, and that was enough. I kept the duffel packed, laptop humming on a milk crate beside the couch, clinging to routine like it had saved me. Sleep came in fits. The first night, I woke up cold again, breath fog in the dark, but no thumping, no whispers. I chalked it up to nerves, rolled over, and forced my eyes shut. The second night, same thing. Freezing, heart racing, but quiet. By the third, I was jumpy, checking shadows, listening too hard to the creaks of Jake's old building. He'd laugh when I flinched at a door slamming down the hall. Relax, dude. You're not there anymore. He was right. I wasn't, but it didn't feel over. Thursday night, I burned the journal, took it to the alley behind Jake's place, dumped it in a trash can, and lit it with a match from his kitchen. The pages curled, blackening. Samuel Creed's words going up in smoke. I watched it burn, the heat stinging my eyes, hoping it'd cut whatever tied me to that house. It didn't. That night, I woke up to the cold again, sharper this time, and a faint thump, distant, muffled, like it was testing me. I sat up, blanket pulling around me, and waited. Nothing else came. I didn't sleep after that. Friday, I drove by the house. Couldn't say why, just needed to see it. Maple Street was quiet, Mrs. Hargrove's roses drooping under a gray sky. The house sat there, same as always. Peeling paint, sagging porch, windows dark. A for rent sign was staked in the yard, crooked and new. I slowed the car, staring. The porch creaked. Unprovoked, a slow groan that carried across the street. Something moved in the upstairs window. Brief, shadowy, gone before I could blink. My stomach dropped. I hit the gas, tires humming, and didn't look back. Jake noticed I was off when I got home. "You good?" he asked, tossing me a soda. "Yeah," I lied, popping the tab. "Just tired." He nodded, let it go. That night, I heard again, thump, thump, soft, far off, like it was pacing somewhere I couldn't see. I didn't wake Jake, didn't say anything. Just sat there, staring at the ceiling, the cold seeping into my bones. The journal was gone, but it didn't matter. Whatever Creed had let loose, it wasn't tied to the pages. It was tied to me. Saturday, I started looking for a new place. Something cheap, something far from Maple Street. I didn't tell Jake I was hearing things. Didn't want him thinking I was cracking up. Maybe I was. Work kept me sane, or close to it. Pete asked about the house once. Casual over a stack of lumber. "You ever go back?" "Nope," I said, hefting a board. "Done with it." "Good call," he said, and that was that. Sunday, I found an apartment, tiny, third floor, across town. Signed the lease online. Paid a deposit with my next check in mind. Jake helped me move the little I had, cracking jokes about my haunted bachelor pad. I forced a laugh, but my eyes kept darting to the corners, waiting for a shadow that didn't fit. The new place was quiet that first night. No creaks, no thumps, just the hum of traffic outside. I slept with the light on, bat by the bed, and woke up warm for once. No fog breath, no icy grip. Maybe it was over. Monday morning, I called Mrs. Hargrove, needing to know. "Anyone moving yet?" I asked, voice tight. "Not yet," she said, clipped. "Sign still up?" "Why?" "Just checking," I said, and hung up before she could ask more. I told myself it was done, that I'd walked away clean. But as I sipped coffee in a new kitchen, the mug warm in my hands, I heard a single thump, soft as a whisper, from somewhere below the floor. I froze, listening. Nothing followed. I set the mug down, hand steady, and told myself it was the neighbors, the pipes, the building settling. It wasn't. Deep down, I knew it wasn't. The house was behind me, but what I'd carried out wasn't staying there. It was patient, quiet now, but still there, waiting for me to let my guard down. And I didn't know how to make it stop. I settled into the new apartment, or tried to. It was a shoebox, peeling linoleum, a single window overlooking a parking lot, a bed that squeaked worse than the house's floorboards, but it was mine, and it was far from Maple Street. Work steadied me, lifting boxes, counting screws, nodding at Pete's dumb jokes. Days were fine, routine papering over cracks. Nights, though, the cracks showed. I'd lie there, lights on, bat by the bed, listening to the hum of the city outside, waiting for something to break the quiet. The thumps didn't come every night, but when they did, they were soft, sneaky like a cat padding across the floor, testing me. I'd wake up cold, breath fogging, and sit there, ears straining. Once, I swore I heard that whisper, "Open it." So faint it could have been the wind, but the window was shut tight. I didn't record it anymore. Didn't need to. It was real. It was mine now, a shadow I couldn't shake. Jake checked a few times, texting about beers or football, but I kept my distance. Didn't want him hearing it. Didn't want his pity if he did. Mrs. Hargrove called once, voice scratchy through the line. "New folks moved in," she said, unprompted. "Young couple. Didn't warn him. Figured they'd find out soon enough." "You should have said something." I snapped, sharper than I meant. "Wouldn't listen," she said, calm as ever. "Like you didn't. They'll learn." I hung up, her words gnawing at me. I pictured them, unpacking boxes, laughing, oblivious, while the house creaked awake around them. Part of me wanted to drive over, bang on the door, tell them to run. But what would I say? It sits on your bed at night. They'd think I was nuts. and maybe they'd be right. Work kept me going, but I was slipping. Pete caught me staring at a shelf one day, hands frozen mid-task. "You're zoning out again," he said, tossing me a rag. "Still that house?" "Nah," I lied, wiping my palms. "Just tired." He didn't bite, but he didn't push. That night, I heard the thump again, louder, closer, right under the bed. I bolted upright, grabbed the bat, and swung at the dark. Nothing, just the squeaky mattress and my own ragged breathing. The cold hit next, sharp and familiar, wrapping around my legs. I stumbled to the kitchen, flipped on every light, and stood there, bat in hand, until dawn. No whispers, no wait, but the message was clear. It wasn't done with me. I started researching again, late nights on my laptop, coffee keeping me awake, occult forums, old books scanned online, anything about bindings, anchors, doors. One site mentioned residual hauntings, things tied to a person, not a place. Another talked about openings that follow you, latch on like a leech. Nothing solid, no fixes, just theories that made my skin crawl. I burned the journal, left the trunk, but maybe that wasn't enough. Maybe I carried it out with me, in me. Sleep stopped coming easy. I'd doze off, wake to the cold, hear a thump or two, and spend the rest of the night pacing. My boss noticed, pulled me aside again. "You're a ghost, man. Take a week, sort yourself out." I nodded, didn't argue. A week wouldn't fix this, but I needed the break. Friday, I drove past the house again. Couldn't help it. The for rent sign was gone. Curtains up in the windows. A car in the drive. Lights glowed inside, warm and normal. I stopped across the street, engine idling, and watched. The porch creaked, same as always, but no shadows moved. Then the front door opened and a woman stepped out, young, blonde, laughing into a phone. She didn't look scared. Not yet. I drove off, chest tight, wondering how long they'd last. That night, I heard it clear as day. Thump, 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 right outside my door. I grabbed the bat, flung it open, ready to swing. The hallway was empty, fluorescent lights buzzing, but the cold followed me back inside, settling in my bones. I didn't sleep. Couldn't. It was here with me. I'm still in the apartment. Weeks later, clinging to what's left of normal. Work's on hold. Took the week, then another, living off savings and cheap ramen. The thumps come and go, unpredictable, like a guest who won't leave. Sometimes it's one, soft and teasing, under the floor. Other times it's a string. Thump, 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 circling the room, daring me to react. The cold's a constant now, a chill I can't shake, even with the heat cranked. No whispers lately, but I feel them waiting, words I can't hear yet. I don't go out much. Groceries, gas, that's it. People at the store look at me funny. Pale, jumpy, eyes sunken from too many nights awake. I don't care. I keep the back close, sleep with the lights on, and check the locks twice. The apartment's quiet most days. Just traffic outside and the hum of the fridge. But it's a lie. It's here, patient, biding its time. Last night, I heard it again, thump, thump, slow and steady right by the bed. I sat up, bat in hand, breath fogging in the dim light. The mattress creaked, a faint dip forming beside me, like it was testing the weight again. I swung, hit nothing, but the cold tightened, a grip on my chest. I stumbled to the window, threw it open, and gulped the night air, willing it to stop. It didn't. The thumping followed me, faint but there, a rhythm I couldn't outrun. My phone buzzed on the table, Mrs. Hargrove, 1:03 a.m. I answered, voice rough. "Yeah, they're gone," she said, no hello. "The couple ran out last night, screaming, left the door wide open. Sounded like you." I swallowed, throat dry. What did they say? Footsteps, cold, something watching him, same old song. She paused and added, "Told you don't stop." I hung up, her voice echoing the dark. The house had claimed them, spit them out, and now it was waiting again, signed back up by morning. I'd bet, but me, I was still here, still hearing it, feeling it. I'd left, but it hadn't left me. As I write this, the thumping's back, soft, deliberate under the floorboards. The cold's creeping up my legs, slow and sure, and I'm too tired to fight tonight. I'll move again, maybe another town, another start, but I know it won't matter. Samuel Creed opened something, and I walked through it, or it walked into me. It's patient, quiet now, but always there, a shadow stitched to my heels. I hear it louder now, thump, 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 closer, bolder, like it's done waiting. The air's heavy, that burnt smell creeping in, and the bat feels useless in my hands. I don't know what's next, don't know if it'll sit again, speak again, or worse. All I know is I'm not alone, and whoever moves in after that couple, they won't be either. The house is hungry, and what it wants, it keeps, whether you stay or run.